Marcus wiped down his black town car under the flickering streetlight, his calloused hands moving methodically across the polished hood. The December cold bit through his thin jacket, but he barely noticed anymore. Exhaustion had become his constant companion. 16-hour shifts, 7 days a week, 3 jobs rotating like an endless carousel. His phone buzzed, illuminating the darkness with a photo that made his heart swell. Maya, his 7-year-old daughter, grinned back at him, gap-toothed and glowing, clutching her first-place science fair trophy like it was made of pure gold. "Look, Daddy, I won! Miss Chun says I'm going to be a famous scientist." The text read, followed by a stream of heart emojis she'd laboriously selected. Marcus pressed the phone to his chest, eyes burning with tears he couldn't afford to shed. "That's my girl," he whispered to the empty street. "Daddy's so proud of you, baby." He kissed the screen gently, leaving a slight smudge he immediately wiped away. 3 years since Sarah died, 3 years of being both mother and father, of missing bedtimes and school plays, of microwave dinners and homework helped via video calls. His mother watched Maya most nights, her disappointed sighs heavy with unspoken criticism about his choices, about Sarah, about everything. Tonight's job was special driving for the Ashford Foundation Gala, the richest of the rich celebrating themselves while sipping $1,000 champagne. The pay was triple his usual rate, enough to buy Maya that winter coat she needed, the purple one with the fuzzy hood she'd admired in the store window every day after school. Marcus straightened his bow tie in the side mirror, forcing his shoulders back despite the weight of the world pressing down. The man staring back looked older than 32, worry lines etched deep around his eyes. "Just one more ride," he told his reflection. "One more night. You've got this." Victoria Ashford drained her 4th champagne flute, the crystal burning down her throat like liquid courage she desperately needed but couldn't find. The crystal ballroom spun in slow motion around her, a kaleidoscope of designer gowns, false smiles, and predatory eyes. 300 guests celebrated her father's latest pharmaceutical acquisition, another billion added to the family empire, another piece of her soul sold to the highest bidder. Her scarlet dress chosen by her father's publicist, approved by the board, photographed by a dozen society magazines, felt like a beautiful prison. She caught her reflection in the gilded mirrors lining the walls. Perfect blonde waves, flawless makeup, empty eyes. A stranger wearing her face. Marry Richard Blackwell or lose everything. Her father's words from this morning thundered through her memory, delivered over breakfast as casually as a weather report. Richard Blackwell, pharmaceutical heir, her father's newest business partner, a man whose cold eyes had assessed her like livestock at auction. "The merger needs this marriage, Victoria. Our families united will control 60% of the Northeast medical supply chain. Your feelings are irrelevant, no discussion, no choice. Just an expectation she'd been groomed for since birth. Be beautiful, be silent. Be profitable." Victoria's chest tightened as she spotted Richard across the ballroom, his hand possessively gripping another woman's waist, whispering something that made her giggle. Her future husband, already unfaithful before the engagement was even announced. The room tilted dangerously. Guests' laughter became distorted echoes, faces melting into grotesque masks. Her throat constricted, each breath harder than the last. Panic attack, she thought initially. But no, this was different, physical, wrong. She stumbled toward the exit, gasping, one hand clawing at her throat while the other reached for the pillar. The champagne? Something in the champagne. Her vision darkened at the edges as realization struck like lightning. Someone had poisoned her drink. Her father's enemies. Richard's competitors. Maybe even Richard himself. Marcus had been standing by his car, checking his phone for Maya's goodnight text when he heard the commotion. Years of instinct from his Army medic days kicked in before his brain fully processed what he was seeing. A woman in a stunning red dress collapsed against the marble pillar near the ballroom entrance, her body convulsing, lips turning a terrifying shade of blue. Guests scattered like startled birds, phones out, filming instead of helping. Someone called 911. A woman shrieked, but nobody moved. everyone frozen in that peculiar paralysis of the wealthy when confronted with real crisis. Marcus sprinted across the parking lot, his shoes slapping against wet pavement. "Allergic reaction anaphylaxis," someone shouted uselessly. He reached her just as she slid down the pillar, caught her before her head hit marble. Up close, he recognized her instantly: Victoria Ashford, the billionaire's daughter, her face plastered across every society page and business magazine. But right now, she wasn't an heiress. She was just a woman dying in his arms. Her eyes found his, desperate and terrified, trying to form words her swelling throat wouldn't allow. "Stay with me," Marcus commanded, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Her pulse was weak, thready, breathing shallow and labored, throat closing. He'd seen this before in Kandahar when Rodriguez went into anaphylactic shock from a bee sting. They'd lost Rodriguez because the epinephrine was too far away. Marcus scanned her body, searching. There a medical alert bracelet on her wrist, mostly hidden by her sleeve. He grabbed it, read the engraving. "Severe shellfish allergy. EpiPen in purse." His eyes darted around frantically. A small clutch lay abandoned near the entrance. Marcus lunged for it, dumped the contents. Lipstick, phone wallet, keys, no EpiPen. His mind raced through options, all of them bad. Ambulance was coming, but traffic was gridlocked from the gala. She had maybe 2 minutes before her airway closed completely. Then he remembered an old field medic technique, desperate and dangerous, but sometimes effective for poison-induced anaphylaxis, creating a pressure differential, forcing oxygen exchange. It required direct mouth-to-mouth contact, aggressive intervention. It was insane. It might not work, but doing nothing meant watching her die. Marcus made his choice in a heartbeat, pulled her close, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was nothing like the movies. No romance, no tenderness, just desperate clinical urgency. Marcus breathed hard into her mouth, forcing air past the swelling. One hand on her throat, feeling for response, the other supporting her head. Breathe, compress her chest. Breathe again. Her body jerked against his. Around them, the crowd exploded. Phones flashed like fireworks. Gasps and shouts echoed off marble walls. "He's assaulting her," someone screamed. "Get him off her," another voice demanded. Security guards rushed forward, but Marcus didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Breathe. Compress. Breathe. Suddenly, Victoria gasped, a horrible, beautiful, wheezing sound. Air rushed into her lungs. Her eyes flew open, wide and blue and alive. Color flooded back into her face. She coughed violently, each hack painful but proof her airway was opening. Marcus pulled back, hands shaking with adrenaline, and turned her on her side as she retched onto the pristine marble. "You're okay," he murmured, rubbing her back. "You're going to be okay. Ambulance is coming. Stay with me." Victoria's hand shot out, gripping his jacket with surprising strength. She looked up at him, mascara streaked down her cheeks, lipstick smeared, completely vulnerable in a way she'd probably never been in public. "You ... she wheezed, each word an effort. Their eyes locked and something passed between them: recognition, connection, a spark that defied logic and circumstance. Then the moment shattered. "Get your hands off my daughter." A man's voice boomed across the courtyard like thunder. Charles Ashford himself, billionaire patriarch, parted the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. His face was purple with rage, eyes blazing. Behind him, Richard Blackwell smirked with barely concealed satisfaction. Security guards seized Marcus's arms, yanking him away from Victoria. "I was helping her," Marcus protested, but his words were drowned out by the chaos. Cameras flashed. Guests whispered. And Victoria, still gasping on the ground, reached toward him as they dragged him away, her voice lost in the sirens that finally arrived. The police interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Marcus sat in a metal chair bolted to the floor, his bow tie askew, his jacket torn from the security guard's rough handling. His wrists ached from the handcuffs they'd finally removed. Across the scarred table, 2 detectives stared at him like he was a predator they'd successfully caged. "Let me get this straight," Detective Morrison said, his voice dripping with skepticism. You, a driver, just happened to be in the right place to save Victoria Ashford, one of the richest women in America. And your method of saving her was to kiss her in front of 300 witnesses? It wasn't a kiss, Marcus said for the 10th time, exhaustion making his voice hoarse. It's a field medic technique. Forced respiration for anaphylactic shock when no EpiPen is available. I learned it in the Army. I was a combat medic in Afghanistan. He'd shown them his discharge papers, his medical training certificates, everything he had in his wallet. They'd barely glanced at them. Detective Chun, the younger one, leaned forward. Oh, maybe you saw an opportunity. Beautiful, rich woman, vulnerable moment. Maybe you thought you'd play hero, get your picture in the papers, leverage it for a payday. Maybe you even caused the reaction somehow. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt his temper rising, but forced it down. Getting angry was what they wanted. What they expected from someone who looked like him. My daughter, Marcus said quietly, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. Maya, she's 7. I have custody. I work 3 jobs to support her. I don't have time for schemes or blackmail or whatever you think I'm doing. I saw someone dying and I helped. That's it. That's the whole story. He showed them Maya's photo, her science fair trophy, her goodnight text that he hadn't been able to answer. Can I please just call my mother? She's watching my daughter. Maya will be scared if I don't come home. The detectives exchanged glances. Morrison's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting from suspicious to confused to something like embarrassment. You're free to go, he said abruptly, standing. Miss Ashford has declined to press charges. In fact, she's requesting to speak with you. Marcus blinked, certain he'd misheard. What? Chun was already opening the door. You heard him. The princess wants to see her knight in shining armor. Must be your lucky day. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut, but Marcus didn't care. He just wanted to go home, hug his daughter, and forget this nightmare ever happened. Victoria sat in her private hospital room, and 4 drip in her arm, monitors beeping steadily, and fury burning in her chest hotter than any allergic reaction. Her father paced like a caged tiger, phone pressed to his ear, barking orders about damage control and narrative management. Richard lounged in the corner chair, scrolling through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something he saw. They hadn't asked if she was okay, hadn't held her hand, hadn't shown one moment of genuine concern, just anger that the evening's carefully orchestrated event had been disrupted. The story is already everywhere, her father's publicist said via speakerphone, her voice tinny and stressed. Driver saves heiress with kiss of life. It's trending globally. Hashtag kiss of life, hashtag modern fairy tale, hashtag real life prince. The photos are quite intimate. Victoria closed her eyes, remembering the moment this stranger's face above hers, determined and kind, breathing life back into her lungs when everyone else had just watched. She remembered his eyes, brown and warm, filled with nothing but focus and compassion. She remembered his hands, gentle but firm, keeping her alive. She remembered feeling safe for the first time in years. We'll spin it, Charles Ashford declared, ending his call with a sharp jab. The driver was doing his job. Nothing more. We'll release a statement thanking him for his quick thinking, give him some money, and make this go away. He finally looked at Victoria, his eyes cold and calculating. And you'll announce your engagement to Richard next week as planned. This little incident changes nothing. Victoria felt something crack inside her like ice breaking after a long winter. For 28 years, she'd been obedient, compliant, the perfect daughter. But that man Marcus, she'd learned his name from the police report, had risked everything to save her life while her own father plotted damage control. I want to see him, Victoria said, her voice rough but steady. Charles stopped pacing. Absolutely not. I want to thank him personally. He saved my life. Richard laughed, a cruel sound. Darling, he's a driver. You don't need to thank the help. That's what checks are for. Something hot and righteous surged through Victoria's veins. She ripped the 4 from her arm, ignoring the nurse's protests, and stood on shaky legs. "Get him here, now, or I'll walk out of this hospital, find him myself, and give every reporter in that hallway downstairs an exclusive interview about how my own father cares more about optics than my life." The room went silent. Charles's jaw clenched. But he made the call. Marcus stepped into the hospital room feeling like he'd walked onto another planet. Everything was cream and gold and expensive, from the leather furniture to the massive flower arrangements that looked like they cost more than his monthly rent. Victoria Ashford sat in an armchair by the window, wearing hospital pajamas that probably cost more than his car payment, looking small and real and nothing like the icy heiress from the magazines. Their eyes met, and that spark from before, the one he'd felt when she was dying in his arms, ignited again, stronger this time. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice still raspy. "I'm told you saved my life." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, aware of her father's glare burning into his back, of Richard Blackwell's contemptuous sneer, of the layer in the corner taking notes. "I did what anyone would do, Miss Ashford. I'm just glad you're okay." "Victoria, please," she said, and stood crossing the room to him. Up close, he could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the exhaustion, the fear she was trying to hide. "And you're wrong. Most people did nothing. They filmed it. You acted." She held out her hand. Marcus took it, her fingers cool and delicate in his calloused palm. The handshake lasted a moment too long. "I'm Marcus," he said. "Marcus Bennett." "I know," Victoria replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I read the police report while I was arguing for your release. Army medic. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Single father. 3 jobs. Your daughter Maya just won her science fair. She'd memorized his file." Why had she memorized his file? Charles cleared his throat loudly. "Yes, well, very heroic. Mr. Bennett, the Ashford Foundation would like to present you with a reward for your quick thinking. $50,000, which I'm sure will be very helpful for your ... situation." He said situation like Marcus's life was something distasteful that needed fixing. Marcus felt the familiar anger rising, the assumption that money solved everything, that he could be bought and dismissed. "I don't want your money, sir. I'm just glad your daughter is safe." The room went silent. Even Richard looked up from his phone, surprised. "Everyone wants money, Mr. Bennett," Charles said carefully. "Perhaps you'd like more time to consider?" He said no. "Father," Victoria interrupted, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "Maybe not everyone has a price." The air crackled with tension. Marcus knew he should leave, should escape back to his normal life, but Victoria's hand was still in his, and something about the desperate hope in her eyes kept him rooted to the spot. "Actually," Victoria said slowly, an idea forming behind her eyes, "I have a different proposition for Mr. Bennett. I'd like to hire Marcus as my personal driver," Victoria announced. Her voice steady, despite the chaos she knew she was about to unleash. "Effective immediately. I need someone I can trust, and he's proven himself trustworthy." The room exploded. Her father's face went from red to purple. Richard shot to his feet, phone clattering to the floor. The lawyer's pen froze mid-note, and Marcus looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. But for the first time in her life, Victoria felt like she was thinking clearly. "Absolutely not," Charles thundered. "Victoria, you have a perfectly competent security team. Who let me get poisoned at our own gala?" Victoria shot back. "Someone put shellfish extract in my champagne, father. Someone at that party tried to kill me, and your perfectly competent team was too busy checking credentials to notice." She turned to Marcus, who still looked stunned. "I'll pay you $200,000 a year. Health insurance for you and your daughter. Housing if you need it. All I ask is that you drive me where I need to go and watch my back." Marcus's mind reeled. $200,000. That was more than all 3 of his jobs combined. That was Maya's college fund. That was security. That was ... impossible. Miss Ashford, I don't know anything about being a personal driver for, you know how to keep someone alive? Victoria interrupted gently. That's all I need. Their eyes held, and Marcus saw something there he recognized: desperation. This wasn't about having a driver. This was about survival. About having one person in her world who wasn't bought by her father or plotting against her. This is insane, Richard interjected, stepping between them. Victoria, you're being emotional. You've been through trauma. You're not thinking clearly. He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, Richard. And I'm done being told what I need and who I can trust. She looked at Marcus, her expression vulnerable and fierce simultaneously. Will you take the job, Marcus? Please? Marcus thought of Maya, of bills paid on time, of actually being able to take her to school himself instead of relying on his mother, of health insurance that covered her asthma medication without copays that made him choose between medicine and groceries. But he also thought of the danger radiating from this room, the power plays and manipulation, the world he didn't understand and didn't want to. I need to talk to my daughter first, he said finally. And if I do this, I have conditions. I pick her up from school every day. No exceptions. And if I think you're in danger, we leave. No arguments. Your safety comes first? Victoria smiled, genuine and bright, and Marcus realized he'd never seen her really smile before. It transformed her entire face. Deal, she said, extending her hand again. This time, when Marcus shook it, he felt like he was signing a contract that would change everything. He had no idea how right he was. 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself living in a guest house on the Ashford estate, driving Victoria to endless meetings, charity events, and business dinners, and slowly unraveling the mystery of who tried to kill her. The poison had been deliberate shellfish extract concentrated enough to trigger fatal anaphylaxis. The police investigation had gone nowhere, suspiciously fast. But Marcus, trained to notice details, started seeing patterns. The way Richard watched Victoria with possessive anger rather than concern. The way certain board members avoided eye contact with her. The way her father discussed her like an asset to be traded. Maya had adjusted surprisingly well, delighted by the estate's enormous grounds, the pool, and the library that was bigger than their old apartment. She'd bonded with Victoria instantly, dragging her to tea parties and science experiments, treating her like the big sister she'd never had. Watching them together did something to Marcus's carefully guarded heart. Victoria read Maya bedtime stories with different voices for each character. She helped with homework, explaining fractions with a patience that made Maya's eyes light up. She was gentle and kind and nothing like the ice queen the media portrayed. Late one night, Marcus found Victoria in the estate's garden, sitting on a bench under the stars, wrapped in a blanket, looking small and lost. Can't sleep? He asked, sitting beside her. She shook her head. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back at that gala, feeling my throat close, thinking I'm going to die. Her voice cracked. I keep wondering who hated me enough to do it. My father's enemies? Richard's competitors? Someone on the board who thinks I'm a liability? Marcus wanted to put his arm around her, comfort her, but he held back. Boundaries. He was her employee. I've been thinking about that, Marcus said carefully. The poison was in your specific champagne glass. Someone at that party knew which glass was yours, knew about your allergy, had access to concentrated shellfish extract, and had a reason to want you dead before. He hesitated. Before your engagement to Richard was announced, Victoria finished bitterly, which narrows the suspects considerably. She turned to him, moonlight illuminating her face. You think it was Richard, don't you? Or my father? Or both? Marcus met her gaze steadily. I think someone stood to gain a lot from your death. Richard would inherit the connection to your father's empire without having to actually marry you. Your father would get the business merger through your death instead of your marriage, plus the sympathy factor. And if I hadn't been there... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Victoria's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers intertwining with his. You were there, though, she whispered. You saved me. Why? You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything. Because it was the right thing to do, Marcus said simply. Because every life matters. Because I saw someone who needed help, and I helped. That's all? But it wasn't all, and they both knew it. Something had shifted between them over these weeks. Something that grew every time their eyes met. Every time their hands accidentally touched. Every time Victoria laughed at one of Maya's jokes or Marcus caught her staring at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Marcus, Victoria said softly, dangerously, I think I'm falling in love with you. And the world tilted on its axis. The confrontation happened at the emergency board meeting. Charles Ashford called to announce Victoria's engagement. Marcus stood by the door, officially just her driver, but really her only ally in a room full of predators. Victoria walked in wearing armor, a black power suit, her hair pulled back, her expression ice cold. She carried a folder Marcus had helped her compile over the past week. Financial records. Email trails, security footage, phone logs, evidence. Father? Victoria said, her voice echoing in the silent boardroom. I'm not marrying Richard. In fact, I'm removing you as head of the Ashford Foundation, effective immediately. Chaos erupted. Board members shouted. Richard lunged from his seat. Charles stood slowly, his face dangerous. You don't have the authority, he said quietly. Actually, I do, Victoria replied, opening the folder. Per grandfather's will, I inherited controlling interest in the foundation when I turned 28. You've been acting as trustee, but that ends today. And based on this evidence, you've been embezzling funds, manipulating stock prices, and conspiring with Richard to stage my death so you could maintain control. The champagne glass, Father. It had your fingerprints on it? The room went deathly silent. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to his phone, ready to call police. Charles Ashford stared at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice wavered. Actually, she can... A new voice came from the doorway. Detective Morrison walked in, followed by federal agents. Charles Ashford, Richard Blackwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent. Marcus watched as they led Victoria's father away in handcuffs, Richard shouting about lawyers and connections. Victoria stood perfectly still, her face unreadable until the room emptied. Then she collapsed, and Marcus caught her just like he had that first night. She sobbed into his chest, grieving the father she'd wanted but never had, mourning the life she'd thought was real but was built on lies. I've got you, Marcus murmured, holding her close. You're safe now. I've got you. Weeks later, after the trials and the media circus and the restructuring of the foundation, Marcus found Victoria in Maya's room, reading bedtime stories. His daughter was asleep, but Victoria kept reading, her voice soft and tender. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, his heart full of something he'd thought he'd lost forever when Sarah died. Love, hope, family. Victoria looked up, saw him watching and smiled. Come here, she whispered. He crossed the room, knelt beside the bed. Maya asked me today if you could be her new mommy, Marcus said softly. What did you say? I said I'd have to ask you first if you wanted to be. Victoria cupped his face with both hands, her eyes shining with tears and joy. I want everything with you, Marcus Bennett, if you'll have me. Not the heiress, not the foundation president, just Victoria. Just me, Marcus kissed her then, nothing like that desperate first kiss that saved her life. This kiss was a promise, a beginning, a choice they were both making freely. When they pulled apart, Maya's sleepy voice drifted up from the bed. Does this mean we get to keep her, Daddy? Marcus laughed, tears streaming down his face. Yeah, baby girl. We get to keep her. And Victoria, who'd spent her whole life feeling like a pawn in other people's games, finally felt like she'd found home.